Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, my friends. Honorable Prof. Ian and Prof. Swandi as a lecturer of Sociolinguistic. Here, I'm Sophia Anis Fitriana as the first speaker and Mas Rizky Gifari as the second presenter. Here, we would like to explain about language policy and planning. And we will try to explain 6 points. First is history of LPP and why, and the second definition. The third is language planning principle. The fourth is stages of language planning. The fifth is case of study, and the sixth of endangered languages and spirit of English. Okay, we would like to the next slide. History of language planning and policy. Language planning and policy was revitalized again mostly after the newly independent states in the post-colonial era needed to reconstruct their identity, including language. In context of multi-ethno-linguistic diverse populations, for example, Algeria got its independence. Its leader decided to follow a nationalistic model of nation building. This model aims at making most community members alike sharing the same behaviors, through patterns, and certainly the same language. Why is language planning needed? Language planning and policy come to solve many problems and conflicts in these states, such as the multilingual geographical spread that may cause miscommunication between people of the same nation. Which languages are going to be selected and standardized as the official language of this status? Language policy and planning decisions arise in response to socio-political needs. Language planning decisions may be required, for example, where a member of linguistic group competes for access the mechanism of day-to-day life, or where a particular linguistic minority is denied access to such mechanism. This is the definition. Language planning are conscious, deliberate efforts that aim at changing the linguistic behavior, function, structure, or acquisition of certain speech community. This planning is often associated with government planning. And then for language policy, it's designed to favor or discourage the use of particular language or set of languages. It is done by the government officially through legislation and policies, such as what Algeria did lately, promoting Tamazight as the second official language in the constitution after it was only national language. Language principles. There are assimilation, linguistic pluralism, and vernacularization. Assimilation. This principle states that every person within society should be fluent in that society dominant language. For example, in the USA, only English movement. And linguistic pluralism. It is the opposite of assimilation. This principle teaches that it is better to have multiple languages within society. For example, Switzerland with French, German, Italian, and Romance all as official languages. Singapore have English, Malay, Tamil, and Chinese as official languages. Next is vernacularization. It is principle that wants to restore a native language into commonly spoken language. For example, chefs from around the world gathered in so-called Israel and review the Hebrew language with success. This is approaches to language planning and policy. There are neoclassical and historic structural. For the unit of analysis employed for neoclassical is individual choices, whereas in historic structural is relationship between group. And then the role of historical perspective for neoclassical is interested in current language situation. For historic structural emphasizes the role of socio-historical. And the next is for criteria for evaluating plans and policies. For neoclassical are evaluated in terms of how efficiently they achieve their goals. For historic, more sensitive to issue of domination, exploitation, and oppression. And for the role of social scientists, for neoclassical, the social science must and can approach language problem in a political manner. For historic structural, as inescapable so that those who avoid political question differently support the status. Okay, this is the activities of language planning. There are 6 planning. The first is corpus planning, status planning, acquisition planning, usage planning, prestige planning, and discourse planning. For the first is corpus planning. Corpus planning refers to norm selection and codification. Characteristic or criteria of good language are established and is usually undertaken by language experts, resulting in dictionaries, grammars, literacy, manuals, and pronunciation and writing style guides. In other words, it is concerned with developing the nuts and bolts of language itself, its vocabulary, forms of pronunciation, and syntax, so that a language could indeed serve in designated function. Okay, there are 7 Ks in language education policy, and there are 4 Ks in language education planning. For the first one is access policy, personnel policy, curriculum policy, methodology and materials policy, researching policy, community policy, and evaluation policy. We are going to the first point. Access policy. Access policy designed who learns what languages at what age or level and when. Access policy is important because it indicates when learners are given exposure to English through instruction and provides schools with guidelines to design and development of their language program. The second is personnel policy. For the personnel policy is related to the teachers. Its important issues are requirement of teachers, rewards, and teacher education. The abilities of teachers to carry out a language in education policy determine in success. The next is for curriculum policy. Once decision is made on the language to be taught, there are curricular issues that need to be taken into account. These include the objectives of teaching and learning of the relevant language, the space in the curriculum allocated to language instruction, and the duration of teaching and learning. The next is for methodology and materials policy. That methodology and material policy is concerned with what methodology will be used for language instruction and what contents will be used for language teaching. There are 2 questions for methodology and materials. The next is about researching policy. For the researching policy, specifies the allocation of funding and resources, like classroom and facilities, targeted for language in education programs. Adequate research are necessary for sustain and promote linguistic development in language in education policy. The next is about community policy. For the community policy, it is important to decide who are consulted in the decision-making process for language in education policy. The attitude of the community toward language teaching have significant effect on policy success. The last is evaluation policy. For evaluation policy, is concerned with the answer to the question. The framework above provides the basis for understanding language in education policy and issues associated with its implementation. Okay, there are four case languages in education planning. The first one is language maintenance, and then language reacquisition, and then foreign second language learning, and language shift. For the language maintenance refers to the situation where a speaker, a group of speakers, or speech of community continues to use their language in some or all spheres of life, with the dominant or majority language to become the main language in these spheres. Language reacquisition, the act or process of achieving mastery of a language or a linguistic rule element. Second language acquisition, learning, the process by which people learn a second language. Also, the scientific discipline devoted to studying that process. And about language shift, also known as a language transfer, is the process whereby a speech community shifts to different language, usually over an extended period of time. Often, languages that are perceived to be higher status stabilize or spread at the expense of other languages that are perceived by their own speakers to be lower speakers. Okay, the next is status planning. For status planning is concerned with official decision about the appropriate use of language. The result of status planning are laws, clauses in the constitutions prescribing the official standing of languages and regulation for their use in public administrations. For the third is to review argues that there are four aspects related to the status of second. For the first, their status for their own communicative purposes, their roles as second language as a lingua franca or as a language of instruction. The third is their role as immigrant or ethnic minority languages. And fourth, the degree to which promotion and second language impacts on linguistic or language rights. The third is usage planning. Usage planning refers to efforts to extend the communicative domains of given language. This usually occurs in opposition to a replacing language after political reconstitution, like administrative devolution, federalism, or national independence. But in more extreme cases, usage planning forms part of regeneration efforts on behalf of dying languages. The fourth is acquisition planning. In education, typically describe the language teaching policy status. Foreign or second language instruction can be motivated by humanistic rationales, by economic interest calculation, by assessment about national security or geopolitical interests, or by responses to the needs, opportunities, and rights of linguist minorities. The fifth is prestige planning. There are 2 points. While this often accompanies status planning, there is an ancient history of poetic, philosophical, and religious involvement in attaching enhanced prestige to given codes that precede formal planning processes, and the production of colloquial literature by poets, prose writers, and other cultural figures has effect that can be useful discussed as language planning. The sixth is discourse planning. Discourse planning refers to the influence and effect on people's mental states, behaviors, and belief system through the linguistically mediated ideological working of institutions, discipline, and diverse social formation. Discourse permits contest and negotiation. Therefore, planning discourse can be seen as the effort of institutions and diverse interests to shape. The suggestion about discourse planning helps to the language planning policy to be more appreciative of the fact that there is no interest-free policy. A discourse orientation highlights to the ways in which problems are framed, interest, safe in the farming, and the alternative framing. For the next is non-governmental organization. In education sector, there are non-governmental sector or organizations that have a significant impact on language acquisition, such as the Academic Franchise of French or the Royal Academia Española of Spain. These organizations often create their own dictionaries and grammar books, thus affecting the materials students are exposed to school. Although these governments do not hold official power, they influence government planning. They influence government planning decisions, such as with educational materials affecting acquisition. Okay, for the next slide will be explained by Mas Ari. Thanks for your time. And Mas Ari, time is yours. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.